2026 has just started a few weeks ago, giving us a brand new year for doors and for Roblox in general, and I'm already dreading every second of it. And looking back, this might be a hot take, but I think 2025 is a pretty solid year for Roblox doors. I know the player count might suggest otherwise, but I think the updates we got this year were great. We got what is easily the best subfloor in the game, as well as a bunch of new modes to spice up the gameplay. It definitely wasn't the best year for doors given the lack of main floors, but I think the stuff we got was pretty good. Anyway, with 2025 officially being over, a lot of players are wondering what updates we're going to be getting for 2026. We already got our first update for the year, being the daily run, and that seemed to be a pretty good start, but there isn't too much to say about it. So people are already looking forward to the different updates we're going to get this year. So for one of my first videos of the year, I thought it would be fun to predict what updates I think we're going to get in 2026. Then in December, we can look back and see how accurate I was. Now this year is going to be pretty interesting because this is going to be the first full year with the new batch update system. For those of you who weren't in the loop, the developers have already decided to change how they're going to release updates. In previous years, the game would only receive major updates a few times throughout the year. These major updates would bring in a huge new addition to the game, as well as some small changes that people don't really notice. With this new update system, we're still going to get major updates, but these smaller features are now going to be released in smaller updates known as batches. These batches won't include anything groundbreaking, but it'll be something to change up the gameplay a little bit and keep players entertained while the devs work on the major updates. Essentially, we're getting small parts of the updates earlier than usual. The devs have estimated that we're going to get one batch update each month, meaning that we're probably going to get at least 12 updates this year. This is completely unheard of for a game like Doors, even if these updates are much smaller than usual. But because of all this, it's going to be pretty challenging to predict what batches we're going to get specifically. So for this video, I'm going to be splitting up the update predictions into two sections. First, we're going to go over the major updates that we're going to be receiving this year. This will probably be brief since I think the devs have already given us a general roadmap for what to expect. For the second section, I'll be talking about what batch updates we could potentially get, going over a few of my own predictions as well as what you guys predicted in my community posts. We don't really know much about future batch updates, and since we're going to get so many this year, we can come up with a lot of wacky predictions for this section. So without further ado, don't forget to drop a like on the video if you're excited, and let's get into it. Okay, yeah, it's time. We are 100% getting Floor 3 this year. This was something that almost dropped in 2025, but the update needed a little bit more time, so it got pushed back to this year. I think we are long past due for a new main floor to the game. 2025 was a great year, but all of it was just subfloors and side content. In fact, once summer rolls around, the wait between floors 2 and 3 are going to be just as long as the wait between floors 1 and 2. Obviously, we've gotten a lot more updates this time since the dev team has expanded, but we are still long overdue for the next big floor. However, there is still one more major update that we're going to receive before we get to floor 3, and that is a revamp to the room subfloor, which is officially getting renamed to the Archives. This is going to completely overhaul the rooms, adding in new mechanics and entities. This is yet another long-awaited update since the rooms is easily the worst subfloor in the game. Most of the rooms are just completely empty, and there are only a few entities you need to watch out for. This makes the entire floor just a boring, mindless walking simulator. Honestly, once you get used to A90, there's really not much of a challenge, and the fact that this subfloor is 1,000 doors long is just absurd. Back in 2023, it was pretty cool to find the secret subfloor, but 3 years later, it has definitely overstayed its welcome, and it's in need of a revamp. Now, it might seem jarring for this, of all things, to be the first major update of the year, since most of the community is sick of subfloors at this point. However, it's also been confirmed by the devs that the subfloor is going to have some important lore setup for floor 3. So we know for a fact that we're getting the Archives first. We're not exactly sure how the Archives is going to connect to floor 3 just yet, but hopefully we'll have some predictions once we play it. Anyway, that leaves us wondering exactly when this update is going to drop, and I think it's going to come a lot sooner than we think. If you recall, the devs initially announced batch updates in early December of last year. They probably spent a couple weeks revamping their update roadmap prior to the announcements, so they probably started making this change in mid-November. And if you recall, the Archives update was initially planned to come out last month. The holidays are an important time for updates, and we know that the devs like to drop holiday updates, as we saw in 2024 with the content update. So I think initially the Archives was going to be the holiday update, and then the devs would go full throttle on floor 3 once 2026 rolled around. But because of the batch updates, the Archives was pushed back in favor of a genuine Christmas event being Kringle's Workshop. So all of that is to say, I think about 90% of the Archives update is finished by now. So overall, I think the general release window for the archives is sometime in February. And finally, that leaves us with Floor 3. This is probably the next major update after the archives, since this is a highly anticipated update and the archives acts as a lore setup. There's still not much that we know about this update, but a handful of things have already been developed for Floor 3. So while it's probably not nearly as close to completion as the archives is, I'd imagine development for Floor 3 is going along nicely. And I think we can confidently say that we're gonna see Floor 3 around the summertime. Summer is yet another important time of the year to release Roblox updates since there's no school and people have more time to play. But when exactly are we gonna see the update drop? Well, first of all, keep in mind that for a roadmap prediction like this, a lot of my predictions depend on my previous ones being correct. For example, I predicted the archives to drop in February, but if that instead ends up dropping in May, that would throw a wrench into all my other predictions. So keep in mind that the further we go on the roadmap, the less accurate I could possibly be, since there's a lot more room for error. But when it comes to a summer update, typically August is the safest bet. In every year since the game's launch, there has always been a major update during the month of August, with the last year having the outdoors update and the year before that adding in the mines. But with that being said, considering how much work has already been done on Floor 3 and how the archives is already close to completion, if the archives drops in February, then I can definitely see Floor 3 launching in July or maybe even June. So once again, take these release windows with a grain of salt, since a lot of it depends on the release time of earlier updates. But either way, this still leaves us with one major update remaining. As stated earlier, the holiday season is a crucial time for an update. And if Floor 3 releases in the early summer, then there'll be plenty of time to drop another update around December. So what exactly could this update be? Well, I think I have a pretty good idea, but I'd imagine a lot of people are going to disagree. So this one's probably going to be a pretty hot take, but here is my crazy prediction for the end of year update. 4! Hear me out, I think Floor 4 has a small chance of dropping this year. Now, a lot of you guys probably think this is copium, and honestly, you might be right. But I do have my reasons for this prediction. As stated earlier, we're probably going to get Floor 3 in the summer, which leaves quite a few months for another major update. But I know what you guys are thinking. If Floor 3 does release in the summer, then so far we've only gotten new main floors every 2 years. So how could we possibly expect Floor 4 so soon? Well, you gotta consider why these updates took so long. Floor 2 took so long to drop because the dev team was much smaller than it is now. But because doors became so successful, the dev team was able to expand. And once the mines actually dropped, the dev team assured us that the next floor wouldn't take as long. And then it proceeded to take just as long. Okay, so obviously we had another 2-year-long wait, but this one was for a different reason. I believe this time it was because Floor 3 wasn't much of a priority compared to other updates. It was clear that the dev team expanded as we got a lot more updates very quickly, but it just wasn't Floor 3. We ended up getting the content update, a bunch of new modifiers, battle mode, and the great outdoors. All of these took quite a lot of effort, and Floor 3 was pushed aside for quite a while. So Floor 2 took so long because there weren't a lot of devs. For Floor 3, there were more devs, but the update wasn't a top priority. But for Floor 4, I think the devs are going to lock in. That doesn't mean they're going to rush out the update. They're still going to take as much time as they need on it. But rather, they're going to prioritize Floor 4 as soon as they can instead of working on side content. And believe it or not, the devs have already kind of hinted at this. Credibles has stated that the next major update after Floor 3 is planned to be Floor 4. I think the devs have realized how important the main floors are, and because 2025 was nothing but subfloors, I think the archives is going to be the only subfloor content for this year. And since we do get major updates every 4 to 5 months or so, it's not unreasonable to say that we could see Floor 4 in late December. Now, of course, there's still a lot of reasons I could be wrong on this. While it's true that major updates are roughly every 4 to 5 months, this would be the first time that we get back-to-back main floors for major updates, which means there could be an even longer wait period. And of course, modifiers for both the outdoors and Floor 3 are likely to drop before the next main floor. But even if Floor 4 doesn't make it to 2026, I'm pretty confident that we're going to see it in early 2027. At worst, in a year of this video's launch, if the update isn't out yet, then I think it will be on the horizon. Maybe that's just wishful thinking on my end, but let me know what you guys think. Anyway, with that out of the way, we can finally have some fun with the wacky batch update predictions. I'll briefly go over some of my predictions before I take a look at what predictions you guys had down in the comments. Since all of the batch updates are going to be pretty small, I'll be quick with each prediction. My first update prediction is something that a lot of Roblox games are going to have to implement this year, and that is a new chat system. I'm sure every Roblox player knows about what's happening at this point, but with the new AI age estimation, you now have to verify your age in order to manually chat on Roblox to any degree, and even then, you'll only be able to chat with people close to your age. Many players have actually suggested that Roblox brings back the safe chat feature. That way, non-verified players are at least able to use preset messages for very basic communication. I doubt Roblox is going to add in a global safe chat, but I do think that they're going to give developers the tools to add in their own. Since communication is vital for nearly all Roblox games, I think implementing a chat system is something that pretty much all developers are going to need to consider, with Doors being no exception. Up next is an April Fool's update. We get one every year, so this prediction is a given. That said, I think this one's going to be a rather small batch update, and this time it's going to be a vision, similar to Kringle's Workshop and the Trick or Treat event. Visions seem to be the canon way to create non-canon events, so I think April Fool's events will fall under that category from now on. In fact, the devs have hinted that the past April Fool's events, Super Hard Mode and Survive the Draco Bloxers, are going to become visions as well. And if that does happen, that would mean that Glitch canonically created Jeff the Killer in the Doors universe, which is honestly hilarious to me. There's also some quality updates we can expect to see that the developers have planned in the past. This includes a Hotel Seek revamp and a Mines Greenhouse section. The very first Seek chase in the hotel is pretty iconic, but the second one removes a lot of the obstacles and just spams the split path, which admittedly is definitely the hardest part of the Seek chase, but it gets very repetitive once you get used to it. So I can see them revamping the second Seek chase just like they did for the Mines. And speaking of the Mines, the last 10 doors are honestly pretty forgetful compared to the hotel. The hotel has a greenhouse section, a completely dark area where Rush doesn't flicker the lights and you have to rely on sound cues alone. This is one of the most challenging and iconic parts of the hotel. The Mines has a lot of entity spam for the last 10 doors, but it doesn't have any unique mechanics that the greenhouse does. So I think sometime this year, the devs are going to revamp the final 10 doors of the Mines to make it a bit more interesting. And as for my final prediction, this one is a lot less likely, but I do think that the Grumble Nest is in need of a revamp. When the Mines first came out, it was pretty controversial for how difficult it was, and the Grumble Nest definitely got the majority of the hate. People had no clue how to deal with the grumbles, and it was just tedious to go for all of the anchors. The content update did nerf the nest, but personally, I think people still see it as a low point of the game. I still hope we get some grumble modifiers, but personally, I think the issue with the nest is that it's just not fun to navigate. The grumbles themselves aren't even that hard to deal with. It's just that the layout of the nest is so long and convoluted that newer players get confused and experienced players get bored. Newer players have no clue what they're doing because they don't memorize the layout of the nest. And then once you do memorize the layout, the grumbles aren't even that threatening, so the nest kind of just becomes a walking simulator. Personally, I would revamp the nest to make it more compact and easier to navigate, while buffing the grumbles to make them more of a threat. That way, the challenge is less about navigation and more about avoiding the grumbles themselves. I'm not exactly sure how the revamp would work, but it's something to consider for this year. And to wrap things up, let's take a look at some of the predictions that you guys came up with in my community post. Starlit Knight suggested new room types for the game, because let's be honest, room types don't exactly exist indoors. The rooms you encounter do slightly change up past the halfway point, but that's about it. Pressure definitely went all the way with the new room types, adding in a wide variety, with some having completely unique gameplay mechanics. It'd be cool to see Doors do a similar thing, since that would definitely spice up the gameplay. Fitzy suggested subfloor modifiers, which is definitely something I think they're going to add in the future, since that would make subfloors a lot more replayable. Mav Zelen suggests that the Mines will get a subfloor this year, since it was heavily hinted that every floor will have its own subfloor eventually. However, like I mentioned in my own predictions, I don't think subfloors are going to be a very high priority this year outside of the archives, since that has a lore setup for floor 3. That said, I could definitely see this update happening after floor 3, but I hope they focus on floor 4. But in all likelihood, the mine subfloor is probably something we can expect in 2027. Amongst Us 2256 suggests weekly runs, with grand encounters such as sea chases and figure encounters. I do think this is an interesting concept, but personally, I'd rather just improve the daily runs to implement something like this every now and then. I feel like adding a whole nother mode for weekly runs might just make things a bit too complicated. If they want to add a weekly event, I'd probably go with something more simple like weekly quests. The Algo X Bazera predicts that they're going to add rush variants into the game. This is a very popular concept in Pressure, where there are several different variants of the angler that each have their own unique behavior, such as not flickering the lights but having a very obvious audio cue, or moving incredibly slowly so that you have to carefully time your hiding. This is definitely something that the game should add at some point. However, I don't think that they should just throw these into the older floors. I think that the earlier floors in the game should be simple to get newer players used to the game, and adding in more threats would just make things more convoluted. Instead, I think more and more rush variants should be added as the game progresses, so that by the time you get to the later floors, players will have to memorize them all and act accordingly. I guess the subfloors are kind of already adding in rush variants, but technically in the main floors we only have rush and ambush so far. MaxiPaxi99 says to add a Forsaken collab. Beer RBX predicts that Wade will finally be added into the game. For those of you who don't know, Wade was a scrapped entity for the mines who was going to attack players in the water. I think an underwater entity would be a really cool gameplay mechanic for Doors, so I hope they add this back in as well. Lots of people also suggested adding new stuff to battle modes, such as a matchmaking system. I'm not exactly sure what particularly they should add to battle mode, but it's definitely difficult to find a full lobby, so adding in a matchmaking system that pairs up players in different servers is a good way to help that. And lastly, Jans the Skeleton fully expects the devs to add in the Roaring Night. Don't worry, no expectations are necessary. They will arrive, whether we like it or not, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. And those are my 2026 update predictions for Roblox Doors. Like I said, this year is going to be unlike any other due to the new batch update system, but I really hope it ends up being effective and we get a lot of updates that bring in new players. It's definitely going to be helpful as a YouTuber since I'm going to get a lot more regular content. But as always, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Sorry that uploads have been kind of slow lately. January just kind of sucks, and there's not much content to make on Roblox or on YouTube in general. But as the year progresses and more updates drop, you can expect some uploads in the future. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you see those uploads. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.